Have you ever noticed something strange about change? People often say they want a different life, but when the opportunity for change appears, they hesitate. They delay the decision. They tell themselves they need more time, or they stay in situations they've already outgrown. At first, it seems like fear, but psychology suggests something deeper is happening. The real reason people fear change often has nothing to do with risk. It has to do with identity. And once you understand this hidden reason, the way you see hesitation in yourself and in others begins to change. Fear of change doesn't always look dramatic. Most of the time it appears quietly. You might notice it when you delay an important decision, stay in a routine you've already outgrown, think about doing something new but keep waiting for the right time. From the outside, it can look like hesitation, but internally, something else is happening. The mind is trying to protect stability, not because change is always dangerous, but because the brain prefers environments it already understands, even if those environments are imperfect. Psychologists often describe this tendency as status quo bias. Status quo bias means the brain naturally prefers the current situation over an unfamiliar one. Not because the present situation is better, but because it's known. The brain values predictability. Predictability allows the mind to conserve energy, avoid surprises, and maintain emotional balance. So when change appears, the brain doesn't immediately ask, "Is this better?" Instead, it asks, "Is this safe compared to what I already know?" And very often the answer feels uncertain. Many people misunderstand fear of change because they assume it's a lack of courage. They tell themselves, "I just need more confidence," or "I need to stop being afraid." But fear of change isn't usually about courage. It's about mental familiarity. The brain builds patterns around what it repeatedly experiences. These patterns become comfortable, even if they're not ideal. So when change threatens those patterns, the mind interprets it as instability, not necessarily danger, just instability. And the brain tends to resist anything that disrupts stability. Here's where the deeper psychology appears. Change doesn't only affect circumstances, it also affects identity. Every person carries an internal story about who they are. I'm someone who does things this way. I'm someone who lives this kind of life. I'm someone who fits into this role. When change challenges those roles, the brain becomes cautious, because change may require becoming someone slightly different. For example, a person who has always been quiet might hesitate to speak up more, not because they can't, but because it conflicts with how they've learned to see themselves. Change can quietly ask a difficult question. If you move forward, who do you become? And that question can feel surprisingly uncomfortable. Avoiding change can feel safe in the short term, but over time, it creates its own challenges. When people remain in familiar patterns too long, they may start to feel restless, unfulfilled, or quietly frustrated. Not because life is terrible, but because something inside them senses that growth has paused. Human beings naturally evolve. New experiences, skills, and perspectives help the mind expand. When that expansion stops, life can begin to feel repetitive. And that's often when people start asking deeper questions about direction and meaning. Understanding the psychology behind fear of change doesn't mean eliminating fear completely. Fear is a normal part of growth. But when you recognize what the brain is doing, something interesting happens. Fear stops feeling like an enemy. Instead, it becomes information. It tells you that the mind is stepping outside its familiar boundaries. And that moment, when the mind notices something unfamiliar, is often where learning begins. The hidden reason people fear change isn't weakness. It's the brain protecting familiarity, stability, and identity. Once you understand that, the feeling of fear becomes easier to interpret. It's not necessarily a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's simply a sign that the mind is standing at the edge of something new. And that's exactly the kind of psychological pattern we explore here in the Hidden Psychology Lab.